a hot, humid night in June of 1998, in a town called Jasper in Texas, an African American called James Byrd was walking home. He was allegedly picked up by 3 white men. The following morning, the remains of his body, skinned and decapitated, were discovered. The killing brought back long-forgotten memories of a shameful racial history. But it's a crime that cannot be confined to the past, as it's a story that leads us into the dark heart of the white supremacy movement in America today.
The white separatist state will happen. This is our mission, is to give the light unto a race.
The white supremacist believes that one of the original sins of this country was bringing the black man to the shores of America.
Black power!
I want the Nazis to fear the Jewish community. What happened 50, 60 years ago in Europe can happen here in the United States.
I think in the minds of these white supremacist organizations, they see another civil war.
The 6 o'clock difference starts now.
A 49-year-old father is murdered in a shocking crime. Police say he was tied to a truck and dragged until he died in a hate crime killing.
It could have been any black man, any that was walking that street at that night. He was not picked because of their knowing him. He was picked because he was a black man in this place.
Bird's body was found on this remote road Sunday morning, just outside of Jasper. Today, FBI and sheriff's deputies continue to comb it, looking for clues. Some of the residents in this neighborhood tell us...
I understand that there were so many circles that they have outlined on this road showing they found different body parts. That in itself is a nightmare. I also came to find out later that they had spray painted my brother's face with black paint. That was the supreme insult. To me, that sends the message that in case you didn't know that we did it because he's a black man, we're giving you another message. We're spray painting his face black to let you know that we're doing it because he was a black man.
4 generations of the Byrd family were born and raised in Jasper, Texas. James was the last to sit in a racially segregated classroom. He had some problems in his own life, including a criminal record. But his children attended mixed schools, and 2 of them served in the U.S. military. They last saw their father alive as he set off to walk home after a family party. The exact details of the murder will emerge in the trial, but according to affidavits filed in court by the police, the journey to his death began near Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It is alleged that James Byrd was picked up by 3 white men. These suspects drove him to a wooded area on the outskirts of town, where they brutally beat him. Then they chained his ankles to the back of their truck and began to drag him down the road. Despite the fact that the head and the right arm were torn from the body, the dragging continued. Daylight revealed a trail stretching for approximately 2 miles on a road scattered with blood and flesh.
I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to my father because of the nature of his death. He was totally dismembered. There was nothing there except for flesh and bones, and his head was severed from his body, and the coroner thought it was unbearable for the family. You know, you don't want to have to remember your parent like that.
The remains of James Byrd's body were unchained by the roadside near a cemetery and a church in a predominantly black neighborhood.
This
reestablish as a pattern practiced in this country in the 1910s, the 1920s, the 1930s, when white mobs would seize a black person and would take that person and kill him, usually in some horrific manner, burning at the stake, lynching, torturing to death, and then drag the body through the black sections of town, as if to say, here's what's going to happen to you if you transgress, if you step across the racial divide. So these events in black context are like ritual human sacrifice, like some tribe of cannibals making a sacrifice to the gods. In this case, the sacrifice of a black life to teach a lesson to other black people.
This is News 2 Houston, where local news comes first. The 6 o'clock difference.
In 100 small gestures, the people of Jasper, black and white, share their grief. But mixed with the grief is anger, outrage at what 3 of Jasper's white native sons are accused of doing to a 4th, a black man, a neighbor.
According to police reports, the suspects do not appear to have attempted to hide the incriminating evidence, and this led investigators to the accused. John Bill King, Lawrence Brewer, and Sean Berry, who all had criminal records, were immediately arrested for the murder. If convicted, the accused could face the death penalty. Amongst various clues found at the scene of the crime, the suspects allegedly left a cigarette lighter inscribed with a Ku Klux Klan symbol. Early press reports claimed that at least 2 of the men were affiliated with a Klan organization, had Aryan-based racist tattoos marking their bodies, and were white supremacists.
There's no real record of them sitting in any meeting of the Klan or the Aryan Nations. There's not any record of them having any even literature from these groups. But they did have symbols on their bodies. They did, when they were in prison, associate with individuals who have the philosophy of these groups. And that is as dangerous as the organized activities of a group, because these individuals believe that they have some personal reason to go and kill a black person.
Morris Dees is co-founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center, a leading civil rights organization that monitors white supremacy activity in the United States. As chief trial counsel, he has won celebrated landmark victories against groups like the Ku Klux Klan.
Mr. Byrd wasn't hurting anybody. He was no threat to the white race. The community he lived in, people got along very well. There's about an equal split. It had no more racial problems than any other town in America. Probably was better off than many of them. But these people looked upon this individual who was hitchhiking down the road as one of those creatures, like a roach. They could just step on him. He wasn't a human being who had a family and people that loved him. And so by picking him up and toying with him and playing with him and torturing him, they were indirectly carrying out the teachings of the Klan, the Aryan Nations, the National Alliance, and all these groups to see black people and people of color as enemies of the white people.
This film examines some of the beliefs of the white supremacy movement that many believe encourage the kind of hatred currently on trial in Texas. Although the Ku Klux Klan of the 1860s were legally forced to remove their masks in 1951, their views on race appear to remain unchanged. And the killings in Jasper forced people to face the reality of their existence and their beliefs.
The Ku Klux Klan, which is about 100 years old, is the original terrorist organization on American soil. It has engaged over its years in murder, terror, assassination, rape, pillage, all kinds of unspeakable crimes. And the modern day followers of this doctrine of white supremacy frequently engage in the same kind of thing. So they're terribly dangerous.
God give us men, tall, sun-crowned men who will not flinch at duty and who will not lie. God give us men. Amen.
Charles Lee is the Grand Dragon, or the head of the Texas Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the White Camellia branch.
Well, the philosophy of the Klan is simply the love of one's race.
I can say on one hand I don't hate other races, on the other hand I can say I hate all other races, because I believe in positive and negative hate, and same with violence. A positive hate for me would be to hate someone that's done something against my people intentionally. A negative hate for me would be to hate someone that's done absolutely nothing. The Klan believes in positive hate, positive racism. We believe that we must, as a people, separate ourselves from other races to stop this mongrelization of our race.
The killing of James Byrd reminded us that for some in America, race at times still appears to be sufficient motive for murder. It became a black and white issue. Extremists emerged from both sides of the racial divide. To the paramilitary New Black Panthers, James Byrd was another casualty in what they see as the continued race war in America.
Here it is again. We're almost in the next century, and we still getting dragged to death. We saw the paper and said, oh, well, they got another one of us. So it wasn't a surprise. But what the surprise was that black people who bought into the fact that America is a nice place to live in, America is the greatest place in the world to live in, those are the black people who bought into the fact that we have a few dollars in our pocket now, we're okay. Those are the people who are driving the Lexuses and the Benzes. These people are the ones who were caught in a surprise and a shock that this could happen still in 1998 in America. The rest of us in the downtrodden communities all across this country, in the slums and the ghettos, were never surprised.
Both the Ku Klux Klan and the paramilitary New Black Panthers postured and paraded in Jasper, using the death of James Byrd for a racial confrontation.
We were not going to let the Klan march in the black community. And we felt that because of the murder and the heinous murder of this individual, Mr. James Byrd, that we didn't think that the Klan had a right to even be in that city. So we went up to confront the Klan, and we went armed.
I went down to that demonstration, and the majority of the people that showed up for that demonstration weren't Klan. They were white people. And I talked to several of them. They said there was only one reason they were there. It's because they were threatened by these blacks, and they're getting tired of being threatened by the blacks, just as they're getting tired of being threatened by the government.
I think quite probably there's been a low-level race war in this country since the country was first organized.
The Southern Poverty Law Center gathers intelligence by investigating the websites, publications, and activity of extremist groups. They brief law enforcement, the media, and the public of the threat that they pose. They state that the Ku Klux Klan are a small part of a larger white supremacy movement that has grown by 20% and operates in all 50 states in America. Active membership of these groups is estimated at 100,000, but their reach extends to sympathetic supporters that take the numbers up to a projected estimate of around 1 million.
Well, to be a Klansman in America today is to basically be hated and ridiculed by your own people, white people. They don't seem to understand the Klan, Aryan nations, skinhead organizations, and so forth are basically working for white interests, our culture, our history, our heritage, and to make sure we have a future for our people. White people, they no longer have any heroes. We've been taught that we are the destroyers of civilization. We have been told that we have persecuted one race after another, that we've enslaved one race after another. We've created all the evils, when in fact our educational systems, our technologies have basically lifted the living standard of the entire planet, but yet we're condemned for being white.
In wars, we have propaganda to make soldiers who would not normally kill people go out and kill people of another nation because they're enemies of ours. Well, Jews, blacks, individuals that are gay or lesbian are presented as enemies of the white race, enemies of what's good in America, mud people, as they're referred to, that'll bring about the destruction of our nation and tear our civilization down. And therefore, to save America, you've got to get rid of these people.
The accused attended mixed schools in a mixed community, so family and friends like John Bill King's cousin, Deanna, are still trying to understand what may have tempted the men they thought they knew to become affiliated with white supremacy organizations.
When I found out Bill had been involved with the Klan, I was kind of shocked, because it's still hard for me now to reconcile this man with the boy that I knew. A lot of people think that he's a demon, a monster. You know, that this was somebody that was born this way. But that's not the case. You know, this is someone's son, someone's brother, someone's boyfriend. You know, it's just a guy, he was not that remarkable. And there are plenty of people out there that are not that remarkable. You know, it could have been a lot of people.
In 1993, John Bill King was sent to prison for burglary. Family and friends claim that while there, he may have been influenced by an organization called the Aryan Brotherhood.
I know that Bill's sister had received some letters from him that she thought were very disturbing, and that they were racist in nature. The family had said that he was in this prison gang and he was a white supremacist and all that, and it did not sound like the guy that I knew at all. The only conclusion that I can come to is that prison had to have changed him an awful lot.
It is known that extremely violent, racially based organizations recruit new members in American prisons. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the most dangerous white supremacist prison gang is the Aryan Brotherhood, founded on the West Coast in the 1960s.
What identifies an Aryan Brotherhood gang member?
A tattoo, for the most part. A lot of them aren't tattooing anymore.
Have you got one of those tattoos?
Yes, I do. The swastika was for white power. The sword was for violence.
And what are the other tattoos that you've got?
I've got a Klansman with a 12-gauge shotgun, and a swastika on his chest says white power. I've got a swastika here. I've got a swastika on my neck.
Can you explain to me the significance of that, please?
It's just violence. It's a shotgun, flames, and a skull. And it was just my way of telling the black population in prison I had nothing for them. I've got white trash down both my back arms. I've got all kinds of white power tattoos.
Author John Craig has spent the last 5 years studying the white supremacy movement.
The motto of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang, kill to get in, die to get out. The way you join the Brotherhood is to accept a contract to kill another prisoner or someone else that they have designated. The only way you will get out of it is upon your death. So if you attempt to leave, you will be assassinated. And if you talk about it, you will be assassinated.
Silence and secrecy are hallmarks of the gang. Patrick Patrick, an early recruit, denounced the Brotherhood when he became a born-again Christian. The prison authorities have placed him in solitary confinement to protect him from being killed.
Can you explain from a prisoner's perspective why anybody would want to join a gang in prison?
Fellowship. In a totally self-centered society, we're a family. We actually, you know how they got me in? I shunned them for years, told them, what could you do for me that I can't do for myself? You know how they got me in? With birthday cards. Birthday cards. I didn't get nothing from my family or nobody, and on my birthday I got about 45 birthday cards from all over the system and all over Texas from the Aryan Brotherhood. And that's how they got me.
The Aryan Brotherhood in prison has been connected to an organization called Aryan Nations on the outside. At least 2 of the suspects accused of the murder of James Byrd are allegedly linked to Aryan Nations by identifiable tattoos. Aryan Aryan Nations is the overtly militaristic side of the white supremacy movement. The headquarters of this neo-Nazi organization, founded by Richard Butler in 1979, is based in Idaho. They seek to establish a white Aryan homeland. Aryan is the term they use to describe a racially pure white bloodline.
England, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Romania, etc., etc. They're all part of the Aryan nation. They're all part of the Aryan race. Your history books tell you this. All you have to do is look it up. And everything has come out of your race. And nothing come out of Africa, nothing come out of Asia. The only thing comes out of Africa is destruction.
Richard Butler, like other leaders in the Aryan nations, served in the U.S. military. They have stated that the American government should not have joined the fight against the Nazis in World War II because they killed their Aryan brothers to save the Jews.
As far as Aryan nations is concerned, Hitler remains the greatest leader of the Aryan race. The only thing that they fault him for is that he did not complete the destruction of the Jews.
Jews are the natural enemy of the white race, always have been. My mission is to tell my people the truth. That's the only weapon we got. Now, they own all the papers, they own all the TV, they own all the movies, and they own all the book publishers and everything else. They own all the governments. Every government now is Jew-controlled. How do they control it? Finances.
Every year, Aryan nations celebrate the birthday of Adolf Hitler. Last summer, they marched through the streets of a town called Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, despite protesters. The voice leading the loudest protest came from the Jewish Defense League, a militant organization who are physically confronting the white supremacy movement.
There are times and places when Jewish people have to get up off their collective apathy, put the books down for a second, and raise this fist and say never again, and mean it. And mean it. Whether it's a Pastor Butler, or whether it's the KKK, or the whole plethora of vicious anti-Semitic organizations that exist in this country, we can't debate any longer. We can't have committees any longer. It's now or never.
At their World Congress last summer, aging Richard Butler named Newman Britton as his successor to lead Aryan nations into the next millennium.
I would like to see the hands of government definitely be put back into the hands of white people, and a slow exportation of all the non-whites from America, and thus establish a nation under God with one race. And I think that that will be the kingdom of God.
I want to grab these Nazis by the neck and I want to strangle them if I can. And if I break the law, and if I go to jail, I will go with my head held high, because I know that I'm not going to jail for monetary gain or because some precious Jewish organization is going to give me a plaque on the wall. I'm going to jail for a righteous cause. I'm going to jail to make damn sure that never again will we submissively go to our death.
The threat that some of the most extreme white supremacists pose is being taken seriously by the FBI.
They really fall into the category of anti-government, anti-Jewish, anti-black, basically white supremacists. They believe that the nation should be run by the white race. We've had a series of investigations here in the past couple of years that showed us that there continues to be this kind of a domestic problem, terrorism problem here in the country.
Aryan Nations claims to be a religious organization and argues that their racial ideology is based on biblical theology. They seem to be drawing groups like the Skinheads, some militia, the Ku Klux Klan, and the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang together by preaching their version of Christianity. Their rallying call claims a national identity that's American, a racial identity that's Aryan, and a religious identity that's Christian. They refer to their church movement as Christian Identity. Early press reports claim that at least one of the men accused of murdering James Byrd was connected to this so-called Christian Identity movement. And historically, the Ku Klux Klan have always interpreted the Bible to sanction their philosophy of racial separation.
The basic glue that holds our organization to Aryan Nation and other clans is our Christian beliefs. For a long time, just old-time religion, Christianity, was what we preached in this country. Forefathers of this country, that's what they preached. They didn't believe in integration. Most of the documents they wrote for people of our color, of our race, did not include blacks. Matter of fact, most of the founding fathers of this country were slave owners. At the same time, they were good, decent Christian people. Today, we call it Christian identity simply because we feel that we've lost our identity, that these people that call themselves Jews have stolen our identity. So that's where we coined the phrase.
This Christian identity doctrine is now being practiced in America. On the Aryan Nation's armed compound is a church. It holds services on Sunday. The congregation sing Amazing Grace and salute the Führer. Followers believe that they are the true descendants of Adam. They, not the Jews, are God's chosen people. Christian identity followers believe that people of color are mud people without souls, that Jews are the seed of Satan, that homosexuality is an abomination, that abortion is a sin, that race mixing contaminates the Aryan bloodline, and that the book of Revelation in the Bible predicts a war. This holy war, in their eyes, will be a race war.
What we're trying to tell our people, look, if you follow Christ, if you want your race to survive in a world that is predominantly non-white, then we have to have a home state. And our home state for the Klan is not just in this part of America. We want all of America.
There's a long history in this country, in fact throughout Christendom, of the use of the Bible and of Christian teachings to justify a variety of sins, including white supremacy. I mean, that was true during the slavery period in this country and in Britain, for that matter. It was true in the period after slavery to justify segregation, talk about the children of Ham, and it is true today. There are always people who can read into Scripture or other teachings what they choose. It is an explosive mix because it gives these hateful teachings a kind of moral authority that they do not deserve.
The message of Christian identity has seeped out of the compounds and into some churches, and those involved in the civil rights movement now fear the way that race and religion have merged.
White supremacy religious groups will identify some small fundamentalist Protestant church. They will send their members into the congregation slowly and begin to talk about not so much racism, but about the beliefs of their particular white supremacy religion. And they will recruit members of that congregation who may have some like or similar beliefs. Finally, they will become a majority in that small church. They'll fire the minister, hire their own minister, and then any of the existing congregation that can't buy into their religious beliefs leaves the church. So now they have a church.
The secretive world of Christian identity is a difficult world to penetrate, but the Southern Poverty Law Center believes that there are at least 50,000 followers in this Christian identity congregation. And the mainstream churches of America are now beginning to see the danger that this selective interpretation of the Scriptures presents.
How do you think that we should understand Christian identity as it relates to white supremacy?
White supremacy and Christian identity have nothing in common other than the claim of a name. So it is it's really one religion against another, if you want to look at it in religious tones. And one is satanic, one is demonic, one is destructive, whereas in the traditional Christian religion, all people are created equal, made in the image of God, need to be respected and upheld, and need to work together in love.
The theology of the Christian identity movement has been injected into the prison system. For some, it can be used to justify acts of racial violence in the name of white religious revolution.
We invented this church. We believed that there was such a constitutional right to religious protection that if we said we were a church, we could exist, and we found out that it wasn't quite that way. But we thought we could hide behind the law. So we were going to create this church and use it to use people. If I go out today and commit a bank robbery, I'm a criminal. But if I go out today and commit a bank robbery as a member of an identity group or as a white patriot, then I'm trying to destabilize the Zionist occupied government, and so we could kill people, we could commit crimes and stuff like that. And so actually what I'm doing is no longer a crime, but a patriotic act.
According to authorities, the white supremacy movement is the most dangerous domestic terrorist threat that America faces. Their violent activity has targeted banks, black churches, gay nightclubs, abortion clinics, TV stations, and their crimes are now being dealt with at the highest level of the FBI.
It's mostly violent criminal activity, and some of those cases have been bank robberies, attempts at sabotage of government facilities, targeting individuals for assassination, and certainly utilizing or planning to use explosive devices against, again, many times federal buildings. We have a lot of threats along those lines also. So it's really a mix, but it's a mix of violent criminal activity.
To the white supremacist, the enemy is the U.S. government. And for many of them, the revolution began in 1993 in Waco, Texas. Ignoring the events that led to the armed confrontation, when 15 U.S. Treasury agents were injured and 4 killed, the white supremacist believes that the opening shot was fired by the government when they stormed the Branch Davidian cult led by David Koresh. A fire broke out, killing 17 children and 64 adults. In the mind of the white supremacist, this was a seminal event because a heavily armed separatist religious cult had been attacked by a tyrannical government, confirming their worst fears.
Well, after Waco, once again, I think that the hair on the back of most white people started rising. It showed a significant growth in militia organizations, white patriot organizations, and I think that this government that we have in Washington, D.C. is capable of murdering its own citizens. Once people wake up to the fact that government is the enemy, then we can deal with that enemy, because the people in America are supposed to be the government. Right now we're not. We're being led around at gunpoint by organizations like the ATF, FBI, CIA, and so forth. They think they can crush the white power movement. They think they can enslave the white race, sell out this country without a shot being fired, and they're wrong.
I am terrified of them because I've sat in the same room with them. I've talked to them. I've seen their bombs. I've watched them build them. I know how their mind works. I don't run in fear from them. But I recognize the fact that these are people that have the ability and the religious zeal to ultimately bring down my government.
One of the most potent tools in the hands of the white supremacists is the internet. It provides rapid dissemination of information, crosses geographical boundaries, and its anonymity makes it an effective recruiting tool. One of the most sophisticated websites is that of the National Alliance, which the Anti-Defamation League claims is the most dangerous extremist organization in America today. It is led by William Pierce.
And globalism. This program is the voice of America's dissidents who are speaking out to America's patriots and to patriots of our Western civilization around the world.
I think of myself as a patriotic person, but I am not a flag waver. I'm not, I feel no sense of loyalty, for example, to the government in Washington. I'm not a geographical sort of patriot. I'm a racial patriot. I'm concerned about my people wherever they may be.
When you say my people, are you referring to fellow Americans or are you referring to fellow white Americans?
I'm only concerned with people of European ancestry. I'm only concerned with my own people, but I'm very concerned with them. If I look at what has happened to our culture, we used to have a culture. We don't anymore. What do you hear? You turn on the radio, you hear rock, you hear rap, you hear jazz. None of that's our music. These are all things which have grown out of this loss of racial homogeneity that we used to have to a very large extent in this country. They are all consequences of this growing multiculturalism.
According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there are nearly 500 different hate groups operating in America today. For human rights activists like William Hale, the danger is that this hate speech can lead to hate crimes.
These are very dangerous people. They will kill you. They will kill their enemies. And they will justify that kind of violence, even that kind of violence, on the basis of their religious ideology and their political philosophy.
Just look back at some of the events we've seen even in the 80s with the Aryan nations, shooting up armored cars, killing people. Oklahoma City, again, is, I think, a good example of extreme violence to its ultimate.
The Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, which killed 168 people, was America's worst single act of domestic terrorism. Timothy McVeigh bombed the federal building on the anniversary of Waco, and he was caught and convicted. He was tied to radical right-wing militias. The Southern Poverty Law Center claims he also had some contact with a Christian Identity Church in Oklahoma.
The bombing shocked America into realizing that this country has the capability of producing a terrorist who is blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned, doesn't speak with an accent, and travels on an American passport.
Timothy McVeigh is believed to have been inspired by The Turner Diaries, written by William Pierce. This book is a story about a race war in America at the end of the 20th century, when white revolutionaries reclaim America by force. They target blacks, Jews, and the government, and the novel culminates in a nuclear bomb that is dropped on Washington. This was also the book that John Bill King is said to have quoted before James Byrd was murdered. He allegedly said that he was starting the Turner Diaries early. The FBI describes this novel as the Bible of the racist right.
Timothy McVeigh had a copy of the Turner Diaries when he bombed the Oklahoma building. By all accounts, he has a copy of the book.
What I've heard is he had many copies of the book.
Right.
But do you feel you should accept any responsibility for perhaps being the inspiration?
I mean, no. I mean, you have to remember, of course, that I wrote this book back in 1975. Well, and then I cleaned it up and edited it as I published it over the next 3-year period. But that was 20 years prior to this bombing. The media people tried to draw parallels between a fictional incident in the book in which the FBI headquarters in Washington was blown up with a large ammonium nitrate bomb. I mean, that's really about as far-fetched as you can get to say, well, this is the blueprint for the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, you must have had this in mind. You must share this responsibility. And that's ridiculous. Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City building in response to a massacre that the government had carried out 2 years to the day before, when they burned down a church full of people in Waco, Texas. Timothy McVeigh was outraged to the point that he struck back at the government because of that. He spoke in the courtroom, and what he said essentially was that when a government sets a bad example for its people, when you have a criminal government, then you must not be surprised if the people themselves sometimes behave badly and engage in violent behavior themselves.
And what do you think of, what's your response to what he said? Do you think it's...
I think that's perfectly true. I think it's self-evidently true.
Mr. Pierce might say his Turner Diaries doesn't inspire people to violence, but the record completely refutes this. Exhibit 1 in Timothy McVeigh's trial was the Turner Diaries, and the portion about blowing up a building. He used about the same amount of ammonium nitrate, set it off about the same time of day, and it was in a truck bomb. There have been a large number of incidences, including the killing of Mr. Byrd, where one of the individuals was aware of the Turner Diaries and wanted to kind of jumpstart the race war, so to speak.
Are you surprised then when there are acts of racial violence that your book is quoted?
No, not at all. I'm not surprised. These acts of violence, I'm sure, would have been committed anyway, for the most part. The people who are engaged in acts of violence for ideological reasons, and I accept that was probably the case with the Oklahoma City bombing. You expect those to be people who are a bit more knowledgeable, who have read some of this underground literature. And so I'm not surprised if people who are engaged in these strikes against the government have in many cases read the Turner Diaries. In the case of these 3 ex-convicts in Texas, I was maybe surprised to learn that any of them can even read. They seemed like a pretty much a low-life crew.
But do you recognize that your book may appear to have quite an indirect or direct influence on some people who read it? Well,
I hope it does. I certainly hope it does. I wrote the book with the intention that it should have an influence on people, that it should change their thinking. And I believe it has in many cases. I don't believe that in many cases it inspires people to violence, however.
I think William Pierce is one of the most dangerous men in America today in this whole neo-Nazi white supremacy movement, because he appears to be a harmless old man, and he comes through as in some people's minds is making sense, kind of rational. Most demagogues like him make a few good points from time to time, but his bottom line is that white people have to be willing to die and to kill people to save the white race.
Do you see your book as a battle cry or a call to arms?
In a sense, yes. I mean, it's not a call to arms and get your gun and start shooting, but it's a call for moral rearmament. It's a call to become knowledgeable, to become responsible, to begin playing an active role in taking back our society. Yeah, in that sense, it certainly is a call to arms.
To be black in America today is to be constantly on the alert for real and sometimes imagined slights that come your way. And it doesn't matter if you are a multimillionaire like Michael Jordan or Bill Cosby or Oprah Winfrey, or a kind of occasional laborer like James Byrd. You know in your heart of hearts what happened to Mr. Byrd can happen to you. It probably won't. In fact, there's a good possibility it never will. But the possibility is always there.
White supremacy groups in America are a small minority of our population, but should be taken seriously because they can cause tremendous amount of personal harm. Look at Oklahoma City. Look at the church that blew up in Birmingham that killed the little girls, and I could go on and on about people. Look at Mr. Byrd in Texas. I mean, that's somebody's father, somebody's son. And people who commit violent acts should be brought to justice, and you should be concerned about them. On the other hand, you don't have to frighten the American public in not allowing these people to have their say, because if you do that, then you're becoming repressive and you'll exacerbate the problem. There's some things that are still sacred, that individuals that are diverse, that are different, deserve the full protection of our laws. America's a great country because of our diversity, not in spite of it.
Now head to the mountains, become an avalanche hunter online, find out why they do it and more. Log on to discovery.com. Coming up next, taking on America's most dangerous criminals, a day in the life of the SWAT team on the Inside.